Many people have written a lot of stories about Little Africa, but they didn't live there. The reason I know, or I knew so much, is because my family, the Breckenridges and the Hayeses, were at the center of everything there. Reverend Jackson and Sister Jackson, Reverend Jackson was the pastor of Pleasant View Baptist Church. And a school that we had back then for little Africans was at 36th and Southern. It was Parkland Elementary School. We had many businesses in Little Africa. We had 37 black businesses in Little Africa. We had a playground at 36th and Southern with the swing, the basketball courts, the seesaws, and all of that. At 36th and Southern, there was Mr. Scoop Carl Watson's Grocery, and at 37th and Southern, there was Mr. Gates' store and Mr. Cushman, who was a white man. He had a store there. We had some rental property at 36th and Southern, where some of the people rented places to live that wanted to live down in Little Africa. Little Africa was a unique place. A lot of people liked Little Africa, and I did, and especially the people that lived there. Southern Avenue was where the Stigoffs lived. And they lived about between 34th and 35th on Southern Avenue. And the kids were my friends. I played with them all the time. Also, Southern Avenue and Pleasant View Baptist Church, we played football in the field on the property there as kids. And at 37th, up on the hill, as we call it, the Rhodes family used to live there. And after they had to move, Duval School was built there. And the building is still there. I think it's still utilized as a school. At 37th also, the Smith family lived up on the hill. And also, Miss Mag Dixon had Dixon Lounge. It was a juke joint. And she had that. And also, Baker's grocery store was at 37th and Young. Scotty's Teenage Club, where we as teenagers used to go and play. The Cracker Barrel, which was owned and operated by Spunt Anthony, was at 37th and Southwick. And the Cardell family eventually taking that over, and that was their living quarters. But a lot of people didn't know about the Cracker Barrel. It was there in the 30s. Mr. Purvis had a garden behind Cushman's grocery store where he grew a lot of vegetables. I used to watch him a lot of times with his horse back there plowing up the land. Right on the corner of 37th and Gibson Lane, the Parises lived there. And next to them was the Harrises. The Parises, Bubba Parris's great-grandmother. And at 37th and Southern, my friend Butch Rose, White, and Clemont was out front one day, and a picture was taken of them. And across the street from there, you can see there was Southwick Community Building. .36 in Southern, Cushman's, Carl Watson's grocery store, and also some houses were there. Sims grocery store was there. Mr. Lonnie and Miss Willard Sims, and my cousin Krista Lee Hayes and Holden Wilhelmina Douglas was standing in her yard, but you can see the two-story Sims grocery store, and where the car is, you see there, Wilson Pickett's sister, the singer, she lived there with her husband. And 36th Street was it was the main street in Little Africa. That was one of the main streets. Krista Lee was in her front yard with her sister, Christine. My Aunt Vi to the left, and my cousin, sister, and Aunt Sook, which was Edmonia Hayes, Breckenridge Hayes, and Aunt Viola Breckenridge Anthony was in the front yard of Aunt Sook's. Miss Bell, who lived across the street, always sat on a front yard in a chair. My Uncle B. Ellick had a barber shop, and the shop was in the back of his house, and everybody went there to get a haircut. He was the first person to have a barber shop in Little Africa. My little sister Linda, sitting in the yard on close to 36 and Magnolia, and then Aunt Sook and Miss Taliaferro are sitting in the grass at 36 and Magnolia. Now on 36th Street, from left to right, Miss Annie Boyd, Miss Belle Smith, the Fraziers, and the Richardsons. Willie Richardson and his wife lived there, right where the car is. The houses behind Krista Lee, and she's standing in her front yard, again, is from the left, Miss Annie Boyd, Miss Bell, and Miss Frazier, Mr. Frazier. We also had a dry cleaners there. Now, the houses that was on Magnolia was a Hughes family and the Young family. And further down the hill, we called the bottoms, where the Kentucky State Fairground was there. And the cleaners that we had there, Mr. Smith, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. I used to work at that cleaners when I was a kid, picking up coat hangers or paper or whatever they wanted me to do. That's where I was at. Now, right here, the Super Bit Tavern, a nightclub or juke joint, was there before the Jacksons moved there. That was back in the 30s. And on the corner there of Magnolia, Mr. Pap and Rose Baker lived there. And the grandfather, Mr. Sistrong, which was Miss Baker's father, he lived right next door to them. And the Jacksons had in the back, they had a family, and I think the family was related to them, called the Coopers. They lived in the back of them in a house. I looked like a house or a shed. And the Jackson used to have hogs in the back, and they raised quite a few hogs. And every time they would have piglets for the year, they gave us a pig, and we would raise them because we would save the slop for them to help feed the hogs. And that's my grandmother going toward her house from our house. Her house is in the background, far background. There's a picture of her house also, which sister is my cousin, and ain't Cynthia, which I seen her when she passed away. And there's Tootie Flood, brother, my dad standing up, and June in front of the car. The little brown image there, it used to be some logs there, railroad tires. And every time that my sister would would try to correct me or try to get me to do some work that she didn't want to do when Mama and Daddy wasn't home, I would run there, because she was older than I was. I would run there and either hide there or just sit there. I could hear her calling, but I never would come out. And we lived right there in that house there, the Breckenridge family. It was a shotgun house, and I had many experiences in that house and got several scolding or whippings there for doing something. Sometimes I didn't understand what I did was so bad. Might have been breaking some glasses or some dishes. Or could be anything like that. I mean, it wasn't anything major. But we lived next door to Miss Liz and Mr. Fields, and they were an older couple, and they were like the mother and father of my mother and father, but I know they weren't, but they were old, and my mother and them really gave a lot of attention to what they would say. And Miss F.F. Rankins lived across the street from us. That was our great auntie, and Mr. Benjamin and Miss Tracy lived across the street, and then our cousin R.P. and Agnes Weston, who had some kids, lived across the street also. And next to Mr. Fields and Miss Lizzie was a lady by the name of Francine Williams. She was a very nice lady. She lived there by herself. She used to do a lot of fishing. But again, 36th Street was a main street. It was just a main street going through there. They either going to Dreamland Club or Club 36. And this is a picture of our house, how it looked from the outside and how it looked on the inside. And we all slept in one room there. And in the back of our house, we killed hogs. And this is a picture of my dad and me with a bicycle. I was real skinny little boy back then. Then you come up next, it was a alley there, and the alley was called Sneed Alley. Those names of those streets that I can remember, like Sneed Alley and Smith Alley, those weren't named by the city or anybody. It was just named by the people in the area, in the neighborhood. Because the people made the name of those streets, and of course the people set the rules. You know, everything that was done there, everybody put everybody in check if you wasn't right, if you didn't do right. But we had 37 black businesses in that neighborhood. And here coming up is my uncle, my daddy's brother, and behind him is the house of Miss Liz and Mr. Fields. And we didn't have any sidewalks, as you can see, but that's Miss Liz and Mr. Fields, and my grandmother to the left. They were sitting there talking. And this is my sister Virginia. She's standing outside, and you can see again, there was no sidewalks. We never had sidewalks. Had a lot of weeds, but no sidewalks. As I stated earlier, we had 37 black businesses in Little Africa, in that area. We had Watkins man, paper boys, paper ladies, insurance salesmen, the 4 barbershops, which my Uncle Alex was the first barbershop there in Little Africa. And Mr. Smith had a barbershop in the Dreamland building. And Mr. Hawkins had a barbershop, 34th and Southern, the west side. Mrs. Stockdale had a barbershop at 34th and Southern, east side. And the grocers that we had that I mentioned before was Mr. Sims and Mrs. Willow Sims. And they were near Southern. They would extend credit to people in the neighborhood. And Mr. Carl Watson and his wife, Miss Ruth. Baker's grocery store was at the corner of 37th and Young, originally owned by white people, but later by blacks. Cunningham Pierce grocery corner of 34th and Southern. Mr. Cushman grocery store, owned by a white man, was at 37th and Southern, along with Mr. Gator. Gator's grocery store was 37th and Southern. Mr. Ferdinand lived in the house right there on the corner of Sneed Alley and 36th Street. He was a very different person. He did a lot of things that he was very smart, you could tell. And I often heard that as I got older. He was very smart. We had 2 ice men there to come there. Mr. Irvin Scott, which I still have his ice prongs. And he will leave you 50 cents piece, $1 piece, or whatever piece that you put in your window, the amount that you wanted. And Boots had a little wagon, and he used to push around the neighborhood with ice to sell. Now, in Sneed Alley, Miss Harris had a garden that ran all the way to the back of Sneed Alley. The reason they called it Sneed Alley because the main lady back there was Big Mama, Mamie Sneed, and they were all related there. And if you can see the pathway that I used to go down to James White's house, going to his backyard, I would go down to his house, and he was one of my best friends, and we played a lot. We had 3 teenage hangouts that we used to, we could go and hang out or meet each other on those 3 locations. One of them was the F&F barbecue business owned by Mr. Ted Frazier, and that was in the Dreamland building on 36th and Woodland. And we always go in there and get barbecue, and they had a little jukebox there. You put a nickel in it, and it played. It was a good place for us to go, and kept us out of trouble, I guess. We didn't get in too much trouble back then. And this is the side of the Dreamland. There's a merchant police there who was there to help keep order. I don't know how good he was, but as a kid, I used to see him. We had Smith Barbershop. I used to get my hair cut there too as I got older. But at 36 and Woodland, across the street from the old Dreamland, Richie Carter, who was a friend of Ed Hayes, who owned the Dreamland, he built that building after Ed Hayes had died, and he started what they call the Club 36. And to my recollection, this is how the Club 36 looked on the inside, and this is how it looked on the outside. My cousin Bill lived next door where the cars parked. And a two-story building back there, I had a girlfriend that was back there. And this is my daddy's brother. They call him Monk, Uncle Monk. And here is my friend White and I used to peek through that fence to look at the older people. Now, Junebug was an icon. He had plenty of women, money. He gambled. He was cool. He was a cool icon of 36 in Woodland. And this is where my aunt Aunt Silk to the right, Slim to the middle, and Mr. One Leg Lord on the end. And this is June and Tootie Flood. Now, I don't know who this gentleman was, but he was standing out in front of the Dreamland. Now, this is Aunt Effie and Mr. Ferdinand inside the Dreamland, and here Mr. Slim and Aunt Mabel inside the Dreamland. This is Doc Hines and Red Nelson. All of them were always at 36 and Woodland, because that was just where all the happenings were happening. And to the right there, as my friend White and I, we stand by the railroad track, especially on Friday and Saturday, sometimes maybe on Thursday. But we'd always stand right there and just watch the happenings, because that's where all the happenings were going to be. And White lived in this first house here. And that's a basketball court we built in the back. And this is White and his dog Andy. Andy would bite you, boy, he would bite you if he got a chance to. But he had another dog called Nub. There's an outside toilet they had. And this is where White and I was on the weekend. We probably stayed out to maybe 10 or 10:30, and my mother and them didn't mind us, and his mother and father, I guess, didn't mind him staying out that late. Behind there was Mr. Mose Frazier's house. Him and his family lived there. Next to the Mr. Frazier's house was a duplex where Odell Smith and his wife Bobby and his son Kennerborough, they lived, and on the other side was James White, my friend. His family lived there until they bought a house that I previously mentioned right down the street here by the railroad tracks on Woodland. There was a lot of craftsmen in Little Africa, masonry contractors like Uncle Frank Anthony, hod carriers, carpenters, the painters, and like my dad, he was a carpenter, and paper hanger like Harold Mosby, Sam Carter, he was a carpenter, bricklayer. So all these people were a lot of craftsmen down there, a lot of laborers down there. There was a lot of factory workers down there too that used to work at E.I. DuPont, B.F. Goodrich, Union Carbide, Reynolds Metal Company. People worked there. Those were good jobs at that time. Ace Minor used to have a barbecue business there too. I forgot to mention that. But his was out at 36 and Southern, right there in the field. But he sold, on the weekend, he sold a lot of barbecue rib sandwiches. We used to get a lot of ribs ourselves. The house that you see now is the house that Miss Clovena's mother lived. And then at the bottom there to the left, there's a blue room, and there was a joint, or when I say confectionery, they sold a little bit of everything. Two white guys, Sonny Rogers and his partner, Smudge Martin. And next to them was Mr. and Mrs. Kennedy. And then next to them was Odell and Bobby Smith with their son, Chennaboy, and Archie, his son named Archie. And next to them was Mr. Custer. He had a couple of daughters. That's all I remember, that he had a couple of daughters. They were older, around my sister's age. And across the street, there is a yard that my friend James White and I used to cut. It was a big yard. We used to cut pushing that lawnmower, and that's where we made money, and we made some little money, and we'd go and be able to buy little ice creams and things. Different people, young people had little ways to make some money, not like it is today. Look like some of them just don't want to work. We did a lot of odd and end jobs to make money. And I was always at the forefront of trying to make money with my friends. I'd come up with some kind of idea. I remember we made a picnic bench, and boy, it looked just like the ones you see in the parks. And we sold it to my Aunt Vi, and when she didn't pay us right on time, we went up there and repossessed the picnic bench and went and brought it down to my Aunt Helen and let them have it. But it was kind of crazy. And Kirby Avenue is where we say Little Africa stopped at. And Willie Morrell and his family, they lived on Kirby Avenue. Mr. James and Flora Bailey lived there. When I first got married, we rented their house from them because they had moved somewhere other location. Mr. Morrell, brother, lived next to them. And then Willeen, on the corner, Willeen Sistrunk, and her mother and father lived there. They had a big old truck used to sit out. And across the street there was Ham Frazier's gas station. He had a gas station. And a lot of people would have the cars worked on there. He had a man named Mr. Bozo, but his real name was Nundy. And they fixed tires there and gasoline there. Calvin Winston also had a gas station there in Little Africa also. Bozo's name was Calvin Nundy. That's what it was. Petey Sneed and Blue Sistrunk and Mr. Abernathy, they all worked on cars too. Down in Little Africa. One liquor store that I forgot to mention was Jim Carson's store. He was a white man. Had a liquor store at 37th and Young. He had that. We had several ragmans that would come through there, and they'd buy rags or glass. You save it up, put it in a barrel or whatever, and they'd come by a certain day of the week and pick it up and give you some money for it. Mr. Nathan Barber was one of them. We had a holiness church here. It was on the corner of 36 and Kirby, and it was called Christ Refugee, and the pastor's name was Georgetta Jefferson at that time. Lee Callen lived next door to the church. Lee Callen was a Central High graduate and went on to play. Well, he played football in Central High, but he went on to play professional football in Baltimore, Colts. He had a couple of brothers, so they were very clean young fellas too. But the Holy Ghost Church, they used to stay, looked like they would never come out. It looked like it'd be 1 o'clock. Sometime we could still hear them hitting the tambourine. And I just recently talked with one of my friends, Louise, that said, well, she belonged there, and said they stayed a long time. Bessie Paris, I think she went there also from time to time. But she said they would stay a long time. You know, they just didn't go in there and come right out. So Kirby Avenue, and right behind Kirby Avenue, there was an alley back there. And that's where some of the baddest cats that I knew, along with some others, lived up on the hill. That was the Slosses, the Thurmans, and the Harbins. Now, one of the Harbin boys is still one of my best friends today. So they lived back there, and a lot of people didn't want to go through there because they was afraid they had to fight them. I remember one time they rocked us all the way from Virginia Avenue School all the way across the track, because we know when you get across the track, you in our territory. But it didn't bother them. They kept on coming until we rocked them and got them back. The Fitzpatricks were on the other end. The Boungers, they were bad up on the hill. Now, the two houses here, Pete Smizer and Son Smizer, I was told that those houses probably came in during the flood, just floated in there. And it could have been, because the way they were sitting, they didn't have no foundation on them or nothing. But Pete and Son Smizer lived there. This is the Rainbow Ice Cream Parlor, which was at 36 and Virginia Avenue. It wasn't in Little Africa, but this is where all the blacks used to go and get the ice cream. Now, that area over there was called Needmore. And this is the basement of auditorium of Virginia Avenue Elementary School, where Bob Smizer used to be playing the piano. And this is Corky Baker, one of the strongest men. Superman ain't got nothing on him. One of the strong. Ali talks about him in his book. He could take and raise the back end of a car while the motor is and the wheels are spinning, and you couldn't move. You couldn't go nowhere. He was just strong. And this is Duke Winber, who took over the Club 36 back then. And as I grew older, he and I became real good friends. We had a laundromat, Lauderdale laundromat. We had a place where people sold snowballs to kids out of their house, out the window. St. Paul Methodist Baptist Church was right on the corner of 36 and Southern. That's where Reverend Carroll was the pastor. My Uncle Edward lived next door to the church, Edward Breckenridge. Now, this was a skating ring that was put there every year by some white people. They come and put it there. It was a tent skating ring. I never did see them put it up, but they put it up. It was nice. Had nice floors, wood floors, and it was a tent skating ring. And we all go down there to skate, pay all the money, skate with the girls, and then, park your car around it. And it was just a lot of fun back then. But that was adjacent to Chickasaw Park. Ford Motor Company was down there. And this is hunting. Everybody hunted. We hunted down, even in Little Africa, we hunted down there in the bottoms. the Haymarket, where we would go on the Haymarket on the weekend. My mother and them would have me going with her so we could pack the groceries back. And it's where a lot of people from the city used to, city of Louisville, used to go and get their meats and things. I used to love to go there. I hope I've explained how it was living back then. That's the end of it.